Escalating war of words between President Obama and Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. This morning, Russia tightening its grip on the strategic region of Crimea, despite warnings from the White House. ABC's Alex Marquardt is in the middle of it all in Crimea, where in just days, a critical vote will determine if the country splits apart. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Martha. These forces are part of what is believed to be a growing Russian presence here in Crimea this morning, their control tightening by the minute. Of course, Russia is denying these troops are even theirs. On the move, large unmarked convoys of troops believed to be Russian this weekend crisscrossing the Crimean Peninsula. The Ukraine-Crimea border reportedly now littered with landmines planted by pro-Russian forces, who for the past 3 days have blocked international military monitors from entering Crimea, even firing warning shots. In just 10 days, Russia has seized Crimea, border crossings, airports, government buildings, and military bases. Just a handful still in Ukrainian control, but surrounded. And diplomatic efforts are still going nowhere. Presidents Obama and Putin talking past each other on an hour-long phone call. The U.S. criticizing next weekend's scheduled vote here to decide if Crimea should break off and join Russia.
Crimea is Ukraine. We support the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
As Crimea prepares for next Sunday's referendum, this mostly Russian region is showing where its allegiances lie. So what kind of passport would you like to have?
Russian. I hate Ukrainian.
As this mostly Russian region prepares for next Sunday's referendum, there are a growing number of rallies for and against joining Russia. But that feeling is far from universal. We visited a small village of the historically persecuted Tatar community, now terrified of a Russian takeover. Even many Russian Crimeans, like this couple, want to see Ukraine work out its own problems.
There are some international laws, and we should follow them, but not with these, Russian troops present here, because we can do it ourselves.
It's time for politicians, not just from Ukraine and Russia, from all the world, to solve this problem. Because if we let Putin now to take Crimea, then maybe some other part of Ukraine, who knows who is next.
But for now, a diplomatic solution is just a faint hope. Russia is refusing to speak with the Ukrainian government, calling them puppets of extremists. Instead, Russia is letting these troops do all the talking for them. Martha?
Thanks to Alex. Chairman Mike Rogers is back with us now. Chairman Rogers, if you will, take a bigger look. Look at the whole area of Ukraine and tell us, why should Americans be concerned about what's going on there?
Well, any instability in that region causes economic instability and certainly will impact Europe. If it impacts Europe's economy, it's going to impact the United States economy. When this first happened, Martha, there was a dip in our stock exchange, our markets. So I think they went down 154 points. So it has a direct relationship. We're no longer, completely isolated by the two oceans around the United States. We're interconnected economically. And so we do need to worry about the stability of a place like the Ukraine. And we need to worry about the continued advancement, certainly for reasons of influence, or in this case, taking land by Putin and Russia. We've seen this story before, and when we didn't react as the United States, we thought it would settle itself. We end up buying into a bigger trouble later, and I think that's what you're seeing happening. And at least some notion that we have to diplomatically apply pressure, get our European allies together to start pushing back on what I think is an expansionist attitude by Putin.
But what if this referendum for secession passes? Then what do we do? What does Europe do? I know the Ukrainian government has to be involved. They say it's illegal. We say it's illegal. But what happens next?
Well, it gets a little interesting. So you'll have two sets of problems. On the diplomatic front, you'll have what does Europe do? Germany is so tied to the Russian economy, both from energy and direct business connections and back into Russia. You've got some problems with sanctions and how that works out and how they can go forward without screwing up their own economy. Then you have this the notion of, if they do that, now you have a different legal status. And so some are charging that the Ukrainian overthrow in Kiev was illegal. illegal. That's the Russians' perspective, which would allow them, under their interpretation of the law, to have a vote to secede, the Crimean Peninsula to secede from the Ukraine, and Russia has already said in their parliament that they would accept them. So now you have a whole new different set of laws we're going to have to unwind in order to see where we can go from an international perspective.
Quickly, Mr. Chairman, I was there this week. This seems like this is going to go on for a very long time. But you mentioned Vladimir Putin. What's going on with him? What is he trying to prove? What do we know about him?
You know, well, domestically, he doesn't have a lot going on. That's a problem. He is scoring huge points on his foreign policy, and I think that has bolstered his ability to try to be, a little bit out of the box when he does something like put troops in the Crimea. So I think that's a bit of it. I do think that he wants to be back on the world stage. He wants to be a world influence. And if he has to do it through brute force, he's going to do it. That's his mentality. We shouldn't underestimate the kinds of things that he will do that he thinks is in Russia's best interests. I think up to date, we thought it was a different century, and the administration thought, well, if we just act nice, everyone will act nice with us. And that's just, unfortunately, not the way that Putin and the Russian Federation sees the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us this morning.